I wanted to haul some gravel to fill back in around the footings. This meant seeing if I could get the old retired farm truck started. We basically just use this truck now to haul gravel and pick up broken tree limbs and that sort of thing. Just the occasional odd job on the farm. We don't take it on the road anymore. That's why we have one of the side racks off, so it's easier to load it up. I was really happy she was willing to awake from her slumber. I actually don't mind driving this truck. It shifts really nice, but there's not much power steering left in it, so you get a good arm workout in, getting around the tight corners. My cousin has a gravel pit just down the road, which is quite convenient. We have a couple fields on the farm that grow really good rocks, and this last year we traded him some loads of rock from the fields that we picked up in exchange for some loads of crushed gravel. 4 loads of rock for 1 load of gravel. Seemed pretty fair. I used a skid steer to load up the truck. I've learned that it's really easy to overload trucks when you're hauling gravel. It's a lot heavier than it looks. It's probably good we have the side rack off it because it's a lot harder to overload it that way. The gravel pit's less than a quarter mile from my house, so I just go slow and nothing falls off. Don't have to worry about it. I brought in 5 loads of gravel, which I thought would probably be enough to raise up this whole area a little bit, give it a little bit of a grade away from the barn. Once I got it all hauled, I walked back down to the gravel pit to get the skid steer and bring it home, and then got to work spreading the gravel. I know I'm screwing up my continuity a little bit here. Don't have the posts up yet. I guess I've been watching too many Tarantino movies lately and wanted to try my hand at some non-linear storytelling. I went up to the shop to fabricate some brackets, and my dad was working up there. He's been restoring his FJ40 Land Cruiser. I was getting close to finishing it. It's starting to look really cool. These are going to be the brackets that I weld onto the upright post that'll support the weight of the wooden beam. I did my best to make the most use out of the 3/8 plate I had, and then cut it out with plasma. I'm going to use 3/4 inch lag screws, so I drilled some holes that size. Once I had all the pieces cut, drilled, and cleaned up, I got them welded together. I'm gonna have to pay royalties for the music in this video now, since my dad was rocking out in the background. I hauled the welder down on my barn. Before I could weld it, I had to clean off the paint on the area of the metal that I was planning on welding. I checked it for level one last time, and I actually needed to move it a little bit, so I parked the skid steer on it. Then I welded all the way around the base. Now that I had the base welded, I felt alright loosening the strap a little bit up top, and then I could put some upward pressure on the beam, making sure it was supporting the weight of the overhang. I felt like if I didn't do this, even though the beam is up tight against the overhang, that when the temporary wall is removed, it would sag a little bit down. So I wanted to make sure it was up a little higher and supporting some of the weight of the overhang before I welded on the middle bracket. It got dark on me before I got to welding on the other post. It had been raining pretty steady all evening, and welding in the rain is lots of fun. I drilled out a 1/2 inch hole for the 3/4 inch lag screws I was going to sink into the wooden beam. I was careful not to drill all the way through the wood, marking the bit with some tape. It is a heck of a workout driving in these 6-inch leg screws. Burned off a couple beers doing it, that's for sure. Next, I welded on some side pieces that I also drove some lag screws through. Now that I had the wooden beam supported and tightened down, I could go ahead and remove the temporary wall, which is a fun step I was looking forward to. Felt like I was making progress. It was getting really late here, and I had work early in the morning, but I just couldn't stop because I was so excited to get this area filled back in with gravel and park my pickup there for the first time. Felt like a big step that I really wanted to accomplish for the night. I still needed to smooth the gravel out a little bit more, but I could now do this, and it felt pretty good. Especially in weather like this. The next evening I got to work building the horizontal metal beams that'll support the weight of the deck. I'm going to weld hangers directly onto the beam, which will support the wooden joists. I cut a bunch of pieces of 2-inch strip to length, and then I headed over to get my homemade bender set up. This thing takes a while to get dialed in, and quite a few pieces end up in the metal scrap bin before I do so. But once I do it, it works pretty good, and I can make a lot of repetitive similar bends pretty quickly. I stuck a 2x4 in the bracket, which made it a lot easier to drill. I made a mounting jig, which would help me keep the sides of the bracket spaced right, and it will also keep the bracket perpendicular to the metal post, and it'll be set at the right depth. It took a little bit of time to make it, but I know it'll speed things up in the long run once it comes time to weld on the hangers, and it'll be a lot more accurately placed too. I'm using 2-inch by 6-inch metal beams. The ends were a little burgered up, so I cut off one side before measuring and cutting the other side to length. Spacing the joists 16 inches on center, so I got them all marked, and then I put my jig to work. A little notch at the top of it helped me line it up on my mark, and then I clamped it in place, making sure it didn't twist at all and was still sitting down flush as I tightened it. I bent the brackets just a tiny bit past 90 degrees, thinking it might work pretty good for holding it against my jig when it came to that. I tacked all 4 corners and then put some heavier weld beads on it. On to the next one. This is the outside beam that I'm working on here, which has hangers on one side. But the middle beam that I'm going to build next will have hangers on both sides, so it can support boards in both directions. Once I got that beam cut, I just laid it up against the previous one, and then used a speed square to transfer my lines, and then got those hangers welded on. Next, I got to work on the 2 side beams, got them cut to length, and then got it up on my welding table and clamped down. I drilled some 3/4 inch holes in a piece of plate that'll bolt the beam to the barn with, and then welded it onto the end of the beam. The beam is upside down right now. I left the bottom of the plate a little longer than the beam, but the top needed to be flush with the top of the beam, so the deck boards could sit across it. I flipped it over and welded it before coming in with the flap disc to grind it smooth. The last of the hangers will be mounted directly to the barn, so I need to weld some tabs onto them. I clamped the tab down and then brought the hanger into position before welding it. I decided to weld all three pieces together and then head over to the drill press, thinking it'd be easier to hang on to while I drilled them that way. It was definitely an assembly line kind of day. Lots of repeated processes. I guess it's a good thing I'm not paying myself much, because the labor bill would have been pretty expensive for these things. I got them back to my barn and wiped them down to remove the oil from the metal, and then gave them a coat of paint. I just rattle can the loose hangers, a little quicker and easier. Again, in an attempt to tell a cohesive story, I'm jumping around on my timeline a little bit here, but I picked up my cedar deck boards from town and hauled them home. It was raining really hard on the drive home, which killed me getting the nice dry boards wet. But I just decided to set them up for a couple days, and I thought they would be dry enough to put some stain on. I really like the stain my parents use on their deck, and I called home and asked my dad if he could run out and check for me what type of stain it was and color so I could match it. I was pretty excited to find the same can at Home Depot, but when I got home and opened it, I was a little confused. I didn't realize that they had to add the color to the can. Rookie mistake. I had to do the walk of shame back into the store with the two cans to get them to color it the next day. But just to get one coat on there for the night, I grabbed the bucket of stain my parents had left over. I got a couple funny comments in town when they saw me pushing all the materials for a deck and a couple of cans of stain through the store. They said, "You know you can't stain a deck in the rain, right?" I guess one of the nice things about building a deck for a barn is that you likely have the floor space to stain all the boards inside before you put them in place. I thought I might as well stain the underside of them while I had the chance. And then a couple days later I flipped them over and gave the top side a couple coats. Alright, I think I'm ready to stop messing around and build this deck.